What's the most morally questionable thing you've ever done but would never admit to in real life? Story 1 was working in a warehouse as an order filler. Was all the way in the back of a freezer when I suddenly became very sick to my stomach. I raced as fast as I could to the nearest bathroom, but before I could get all my layers of clothing off, it was too late. I was a mess. I went to my supervisor and tried to gently convey what was going on. His words were, "Just clean up and get back to work." He said this multiple times as I tried to explain why that wasn't an option. Was told I would receive points for leaving. I got so pissed off at the situation that I took all my soiled clothing, locked it in my locker with a personal lock, and never went back. To whoever had to clean that mess, I'm sorry, you didn't deserve that. And to my old supervisor, you suck. Story 2, I don't have a problem admitting it in real life because the statute of limitations has long since expired, but my boss at a PC repair shop emptied the payroll account to buy himself a brand new BMW, so all of his employees quit. But I decided that if he wasn't willing to pay me in money, he damn sure was going to pay me in inventory. So I walked out with enough parts to build me a new PC, somewhat more than my paycheck would have been, but PC parts don't pay the rent, so I charged a conversion fee. Story 3. I got laid off in 2009 and couldn't find work for almost 2 years. Found a job in the industry I loved, motorcycles, and they took advantage of my obvious desperation. Came in as an operations coordinator at $11 per hour after 4 YRs working as a business analyst, directly under a VP at Citrix. Worked my ass off and within 6 months was doing the job of an operations manager analyst. I supported the backbone of nearly every department's analytics. My manager didn't like me BC, she saw me as a threat to her job. Her boss's boss, the COO, knew the value I offered for practically nothing. So being the good executive leader she was, blocked every attempt at promotions or department transfer opportunity that came my way. IT, marketing, and HR all made attempts to create jobs for me after seeing the quality, value of my work and projects I did for them. After 18 months and threats to quit, I was up to $40K/Y-year. Less than half of what the HR team's market analysis calculated my pay should be based on our location and my role, scope, and responsibilities. I know about it because the HR director showed it to me after I'd started working with them extensively on their departmental analytics and had developed a very close relationship. She then mentioned that the COO told her, "So what? He makes what he makes." After HR informed the COO I was making a fraction of my fair market value. By this point, my self-confidence had started to reestablish itself, and my resentment of my department, boss, and COO had festered into a roiling fire. Then I did a favor for the warehouse manager. I built an Excel access time and attendance tool since the one we'd been using didn't work well for warehouse staff. It was super accurate, handled OT, and respected the big labor laws around lunch requirements. In vetting the accuracy, I found that the company was applying CA law to stores in every state. I saved the company $75K/year when I called it out. In an attempt to get to my HR established market rate, I asked for a bonus pay increase for having saved them 2x my salary per year. Their reply, "Saving the company money is part of your job. If you ask for a raise again, you'll be written up and possibly fired." I'd had enough. I found another much better job at a niche distributor in the industry, and on my way out, contacted the DOL and informed them, with receipts, of severe wage theft by the company, employer intimidation and retaliation against whistleblowing, wage job discrimination against several employees and myself. The company was forced to pay $2 million in back pay and $3 million in fines. Morally, nothing wrong with what I did above. The morally questionable part is meticulously breaking all automation I'd created 3.5 months before I left. All of the now business-critical reporting I'd built was hard-coded, no formulas. When they asked me to train someone to take over, I said no problem. Trained him to do it manually, which took 20-30 HRs/week versus 1-2. A few months later, the HR director let me know my job was posted again. At $95,110K/year, I notified the DOL and shared all the documents of my responsibility market adjustment requests, the HR job analysis, and an email comment from the COO that she didn't feel I was worth market rate since I have only one arm. I never saw a cent, but the company was again fined substantially, and the COO was immediately fired. Story 4. In my early 20s, our apartment got burglarized. Most of what they took wasn't very valuable, but I had 2 silver pocket watches I inherited from my grandpa that probably would have fetched $3,000 combined. The problem was that my renter's insurance policy limited jewelry losses to $1,000. Conveniently, my roommate had lost a really expensive 35mm camera, and his insurance policy only covered $1,000 for it. He also worked at a computer store, so I gave him documentation on one of the pocket watches, and he gave me a backdated fake receipt for a computer. We were both able to adjust our claims and get extra money out of our insurance companies to help with our losses. Thank God we used different insurance companies at the time. Story 5. In my early 20s, our apartment got burglarized. Most of what they took wasn't very valuable, but I had 2 silver pocket watches I inherited from my grandpa that probably would have fetched $3,000 combined. The problem was that my renter's insurance policy limited jewelry losses to $1,000. Conveniently, my roommate had lost a really expensive 35mm camera, and his insurance policy only covered $1,000 for it. He also worked at a computer store. So I gave him documentation on one of the pocket watches, and he gave me a backdated fake receipt for a computer. We were both able to adjust our claims and get extra money out of our insurance companies to help with our losses. Thank God we used different insurance companies at the time. Story 6 wiped the hard drive on the work desktop. Every tool, spreadsheet, database, and how-to guide required to do the job just gone in a blink. I literally wrote the book on how to do that job and how the training is delivered and systems implemented across the entire company, most of which I had to do in my own time as it was seen as a waste of time. I effectively automated processes that took hours to do manually and brought efficiency from 13% to 98%. And yet, when the time came to give me the promotion they promised, they brought in someone new to the company and said that I had to train them, pulled the plug on the operation and handed in my notice. The department folded less than 3 months after I left, as no one knew what they were doing and had no backup or go-to help anymore. A little corporate espionage, but Story 7. When I was in high school, I dated a boy who was horribly abusive and ended up cheating on me with my best friend the night before my senior prom. Also found out he had been cheating on me pretty much the whole time via the Meet Me app. I obviously dumped him. A few months later, I found out he was already dating another girl, so I created an account on Meet Me and proceeded to pretend to be someone else for multiple months, get him to virtually cheat on his girlfriend at the time, and send her all of the evidence using a fake social media account. Sorry, girl. He would have done it anyway. Story 8. My friend confided in me that her dad was saying her. She cried and begged me not to tell anyone. I was scared, sad, and wanted her to trust me with this big secret, so I didn't tell anybody. A year later, her dad got caught. No idea the circumstances. And he was arrested and sent to prison for a long time. I feel so bad about it. If only I had told somebody, told my parents, told a police officer or something. I could have saved her from another year of torture. I can't bring myself to talk to anybody about it. I don't know how to forgive myself for that. Story 9. When I was a young and new driver, a car in front of me kept swerving to keep me from passing them. When I was finally able to fly past them, I threw my drink at them. Unfortunately, their window was open, and my drink soared right in. Unfortunately, it was an elderly woman. She didn't wreck or anything, but goddamn, I have felt bad for that ever since. Story 10. In college, I carried on a 2-year affair with a married woman twice my age. I knew going into it she was married, but I kept telling myself, it's not my marriage. So I didn't care. I've never admitted it out loud, though, to my social circle because I know they would see me a little differently, as I've always been seen as the moral compass of the group. Story 11. I deleted the files to a project I'd spent the last year working on when I found out that I was going to get let go at the end of the project. Basically, they had hired me to do this project and planned to fire me when they no longer needed me. Not that I was actually told this at the time of my hiring. So yeah, when I got word from other office staff that I was to be let go, I took my company laptop home and I wiped everything. When they fired me the next day, little did they know all that work was gone. They had just the bare bones of the project and had to have someone else completely rebuild it in AutoCAD. Story 12. When I was a kid, I had a screened-in back porch I hung out on. Just outside this screen, I had a trampoline. One day, I was sitting on the porch reading and saw that a frog was hanging out in the middle of the trampoline. I then noticed that a little 4-foot snake was working itself up one of the trampoline legs, and just as it succeeded in getting to the top, the frog realized the danger and hopped off the trampoline onto the screen mesh in front of me. The snake followed and got close, clearly desperate for a meal. Being the little 8-year-old I was, I simply flicked the frog's belly through the screen, and the snake caught the flying frog mid-air and began swallowing it. The frog, maybe a toad, swelled up with air, and then proceeded to let out a morbid whistle-like shriek as it was slowly swallowed. I'll never forget that sound. Story 13. I used to work for a network of hospitals on the financial side. Due to some internal screw-up, a lot of calls ended up getting forwarded to me that shouldn't have. Things from patients calling to schedule appointments to important legal issues. For months, I continually raised the issue of my personal cell phone getting forwarded a lot of important calls. The issue was never resolved. Anyways, a few months after the call forwarding thing started, the company decided to terminate my employment. We had a difference of opinion. I didn't like working 6 days a week, and the company thought I should be working 7. However, the calls never stopped getting forwarded to my phone. Due to the unhappy breakup, I started just blocking all the calls getting forwarded to me, and I never bothered to respond to a single voicemail or call I received. Additionally, I got some pretty important legal calls that, if not responded to in a timely manner, would cost the company significantly. I never forwarded on or explained anything to anyone, and I deleted the voicemails and moved on. I know eventually stuff probably got figured out, but they had months to figure out their call issues and never did. Hopefully them facing legal blowback got them to fix things. Story 14. When I was in university, I told a professor that the class WhatsApp chat was making fun of her pictures because I cared about her and she was my favorite teacher and I didn't want her to go through that. She ended up telling the dean of the university, and it turned into a huge investigation. Several people were given black points on their university records, some weren't allowed to change subjects or courses, and some had to drop out. People thought it was this one girl at the university who did that, but I didn't have the heart to correct people or redirect them to someone else, and I watched her get ostracized and completely ignored for the rest of the university term because of my actions. Story 15. I was a math tutor in college that got paid minimum wage working out of their math lab. Students would come in for help on their homework. This elderly woman taking an entry-level math course would come in often for help, and she seemed like a nice enough lady, but she was falling extremely behind on her homework, and the semester was almost over. So she asked me if I would do it all for her for a couple $100. That kind of money back then was huge for me, so I took her up on her offer. Story 16. Stole my roommate's gambling winnings. I lived with my old roommate for about 10 years, going all the way back to junior year of college. We got along great, but he owed me some money, and he was pretty bad about paying things back. He also had an online sports betting account where he won $750 off of a $20 bet by predicting the Patriots would go undefeated in the regular season in 2007, but he never cashed out his winnings. I knew his passwords, so I logged into the account and had them send a check to our address for the payout, which was slightly less than the amount that he owed me. I was the one who checked the mail every day, so I grabbed the check, endorsed it as him for deposit into my account, and took it to my bank. I don't feel too bad about that one because this online sportsbook had an inactivity expiration date on funds in their accounts, which my roommate was well aware of since he brought it up every so often. And my roommate's account was a month away from being zeroed out because he was too lazy to request a check. He still thinks that it just expired as normal and that the funds disappeared. Story 17. Me and this girl spent a lot of time together while both of us were homeless. We were pretty destitute, but we were getting by. I'd stay at a friend's house, she'd do the same, and then during the day we'd hang out, apply for jobs, do our college homework. One day we stayed late on the beach and passed out at some point. When we awoke, it was 1 a.m., and we were completely alone. We made our way up to the concessions area in the parking lot from the beach, and my friend, on a chance, slid the window open of the concessions building. We were hungry, so both of us climbed through the window to get some drinks and some ice cream. She opened the freezer and went, "Darb," and pulled out a green deposit bag containing $200 in cash. Needless to say, we stole the money and lots of snacks. It's something I regret, but the money did get me a haircut, and I got a job not long afterwards. Story 18. I didn't give an employee a substantial pay raise that they deserved because he was annoying. I had accepted a demotion to get a transfer because my wife was pretty miserable living where we were living. I was given a team of approximately 15 to manage as their current leader was due to retire. And since I was previously the same level as his boss's boss, I had a lot of pull. Most of the team was either overdue for a promotion or underpaid compared to other employees with equivalent job title experience. The first major change I made was to address this by pushing through promotions and bringing everyone up to 98% expected pay. This takes me to John. He's very pretentious and struts about like he's the #1 employee on the team. I can honestly say he's one of the few employees I've had who I simply do not like as either an employee or a person. He sends me emails constantly snitching on his peers, reporting back to me things like mistakes they made, things they've said, times he's caught them slacking off, etc. The whole team, him included, also believe he gets paid far more than they do too. He doesn't. He was being paid about 70% expected pay. During the first meeting I hold after taking over, there was a 3-week transfer period between me joining the team and the previous manager's retirement. I mentioned that I'm going to sit down and have one-on-ones with everyone, and mentioned that pay will be included in the conversation. He interrupts the meeting to say it's inappropriate to talk about pay with coworkers and against policy. I've heard him saying the first part a few times already. He's clearly very private about his pay. I inform him that I'm not discussing his pay with anyone except him and HR, and he doubles down saying it's inappropriate for he and I to discuss pay. I try to explain to him that, as his manager, if he wants to get paid more, we're going to need to talk about it, and there is nothing he can tell me about what he makes that I don't already know. This only pisses him off, and he refuses to drop it over the next few days. Rumor starts to spread that I'll be handing out pay raises, and he's losing his mind. He just won't stop telling everyone it's against policy. So I hold a quick stand-up explaining that it is illegal for a company to prevent employees from talking about pay. I come to learn that he's pretty weird about certain things and gets worked up often, but I'm being told that he's never been this worked up before. We have our one-on-one, and the entire time he keeps telling me it's not okay for me to talk to him about pay and performance and how he wants his career to develop. I make an honest attempt to talk about his pay raise, but he threatens to go to HR if I don't stop, so I stop. I had a letter explaining that his pay was going to be adjusted from approximately $80K to $105K, but decided he wasn't getting it. I went to HR and explained that his behavior during our one-on-one reflected so poorly on him that I was rescinding his adjustment. A week later, he complained to HR that everyone on his team got a large pay raise except him. Story 19. Boomer Karen came into the subway I was working at, being a rude cunt to me for no damn reason. Well, turns out she was alone in the store. As it works out, I have chronic postnasal drip, so it's extremely easy for me to form a loogie. I got a huge one, and the second she turned her head, I dropped it in her tuna sandwich. Yes, I remember that it was tuna because this is the only time I have ever ed with anyone's food. Covered it with the bit of dressing she asked for, and the look of her walking out that door with her tanugi sub in her bag brought a tear of joy to my eye. I'm not going to defend my actions. Just everyone reading this should keep in mind. Be kind to people who are handling your food, even if they're in plain sight. It only takes 1 second for them to do something to your food and give it to you with a smile. Story 20. About 15 years ago, I remodeled my kitchen. Got all new Samsung appliances. At the time, Samsung had a promotion that gave you a free flat-screen TV with new appliances. Filled out the offer and was sent a coupon code and went to the Samsung website to get my TV. Added the TV to the cart and noticed when I applied the coupon code, it changed the unit price of the TV to $0 instead of adding the $300 credit to the order. Honestly, I didn't even really need the first TV, but I had to know, did they really screw up that coupon that bad? So edited the cart to add a few more TVs and checked out. The answer was yes, they really did implement the coupon that bad. Story 21. I worked for a charity with an asshole manager who was both too immature and too inexperienced to actually run things as they should be. When things didn't go his way, he'd get passive-aggressive, act like a child, and blame everyone else for not reading his mind. There are many times I could have snapped, like him sending me a voice note complaining about things that aren't my job, and got my husband so riled up he wanted to break the guy's legs, for example. But what really did it was when I stopped doing work that wasn't my responsibility or under the umbrella of my position, and he threw my ass under the bus because he got torn a new one by his boss because the work wasn't done. Not only did I write a very lengthy email detailing every infraction, blatant disregard for the rules and times he broke the law, I signed his ass up for not only Scientology, but a JW group with his personal email because his ass left it signed into a work computer and the devil in me knew I'd need it someday. Story 22. I had a programming class in high school and I wasn't very good at it and realized partway through the final exam that I couldn't do it. Once you're done your test, you were supposed to save to a folder that you could save to but not see what's inside of. But since the file name had a very strict format, I was able to open a file from a kid I knew would ace the test. So I opened it, changed the name on it and some other things and submitted it. I never got caught, but since I exploited a loophole on the computer, I feel like I still sort of earned it. Story 23. I have a haunting moral dilemma from when I did nothing. Saw this guy on a crotch rocket being an asshole in heavy traffic, weaving/taunting/road raging with someone else. I passed on other side of a semi, and when I looked in the rear view, I saw a car brake check him, and I'm 99% certain I saw him lay his bike down and slide under the truck. Then I saw tire smoke and some commotion after. I kept driving, didn't call anyone, didn't stop or go back to check, just went on with my life. I'll never know what happened, and it bothers me more often than I ever thought it would. Story 24. I was about 8 at the time, beautiful summer day. Was out in the driveway when I spot a lil frog hopping towards the grass. I pick the lil guy up, and to this day I can't figure out why, but I start tossing him up in the air and catching him, throwing him higher and higher each time. That is until I lose him in the sun, and in my confusion hadn't realized what happened until I heard him splat on the ground behind me. That was the day I learned just how precious life is. Story 25. One time when I was 10, I saw a stack of Pokemon cards randomly in the towel aisle at Target, and they were all new, it looked like. I saw them and just pocketed them, not really thinking much about it. Then when I got home, I realized someone probably opened it off the shelf and just threw away the wrapper. Then I thought, oh, I stole from Target. I'm going to go to jail. So I immediately threw the cards away. Target never found out. Story 26 was staying at a friend's house for a couple weeks. They had a toilet, like it was mad gross. Little kids were using it. So I told myself I would never poop there. Lasted a couple of days, maybe 4 to 7, but I couldn't handle it. So instead, I pooped in the hole of the bathtub. Problem now was, it got stuck there. You couldn't see it, but the bathroom smelt like. Did I ever admit to doing it? No. Will I ever? Of course not. But I'm still very close with him. Story 27. I grew up in the South, and there is a love bug season. Like so many of these bugs, it looks like a biblical plague. I hate all bugs, but these are especially annoying because they are everywhere, and they won't stop touching you. I was 14, and I took my lighter and set one on fire in a moment of anger. Immediately after, I considered the fact that bugs can probably feel pain. I was flooded with remorse, and this still haunts me. Story 28. I was hired on to work in a music movies section of a bookstore over a decade ago. I'd previously worked at a music/movies/video game store, and film is kind of my specialty, from keeping tabs on upcoming releases to making great recommendations for people after they tell me what kind of movies they like. Glowing interview, lots of enthusiasm, all that jazz. I was told that the department head was leaving soon and that I'd be a shoo-in to replace her. So I'd start as just an entry-level position, but within a month, I'd be a section lead with a pay bump. She was gone within 2 weeks, and I was one of 3 people who actually worked in the department specifically, and I was there more than the other 2. After 2 months, it became very apparent that the promised promotion was not coming. And shortly after, the general manager flat out told me that they had decided to simply not have a department lead because they didn't need one. Over the course of the next 3 years, I walked out of the store with 3 brand new Blu-rays wrapped up in my jacket, tucked in my pocket, stuffed down the front of my pants, etc., and never got caught. I stole over 400 movies and box sets, and when I did the math at some point recently, I realized that I'd gotten away with roughly $14K worth of films to add to my collection. I figured that if they were going to me around and not give me the promotion that I signed on for, not to mention lots of bull they foisted on me after the fact, that I was going to get mine somehow, and when they gave me free reign of a closed-off department full of things that I loved, which were easily stolen when one had access to the device that deactivated their security tags, they never suspected it was me, and it actually amused me quite a bit, because after a while, I was the only person left working in that department. So if I wasn't on shift, nobody was watching it or maintaining it. So when I came on shift and noticed that we had a dozen or so things missing from stock that we should have had, it was chalked up to them not having coverage to prevent it. I still don't feel the least bit bad about it because they lied to me, and over the years they really treated me like in various ways. I would have gladly bought everything I stole with the extra money I made had I been given the promotion they promised, but they didn't. Story 29. When I was in junior high, my biology teacher was a real pain in the ass and the most dreaded teacher of the school, including high school, with a long history of devouring uncompliant students. I was not a straight A student, but wasn't a flunker either. I must have been between B+ and C+, pretty average. But my sister was the honor roll student and shooting to be the valedictorian. Our principal was an old pushover lady who adored my sister. During the school year, the biology teacher ordered us, because asking wasn't in her vocabulary, and I am quoting her, to do an outline of every single chapter of the biology book we used during the school year. I've always been anxious, and I didn't know exactly what to put in, so I ended putting in everything and made the chore a huge burden for me emotionally and work-wise. So I decided to stop doing the thing. However, I liked biology. I've always been a natural at that. I had an A+ on every single term and exam. However, she disliked me because of that and disliked my sister because she was very well studied and was going to go for the valedictorian, and no student of hers had ever gotten a valedictorian with an A+. And my sister did get an A+ over arguing for a missing point on a wrong answer. Got sidetracked, sorry. So these outlines or essays were worth 40% of our grade, and if you had to turn in the whole notebook by the end of the year for the teacher to check it out on the day of the exam. So since I didn't have the notebook done, I came into the exam room, gym, because she didn't want anyone cheating on her precious test. Yes, she was that nuts. And told us to put the notebook at an assigned place on the gym stage. I showed the notebook I always carried for the classroom and let me through to take my test, but hid the notebook when she wasn't looking. Later, after the test was done and all the notebooks had been taken away, I went into the gym and retrieved my notebook. That was a Friday. On Monday morning, I was coming in to take another test, and she was waiting at the entrance of the school with an "I am so happy to tell you this" smirk and said, "You failed biology," and asked why. Did I do that bad on my test? And she said, "Oh no, you passed your test with flying colors, but you didn't turn in your notebook." But I did turn in my notebook. Then how in the world would you let me take the test? She got flustered and said, "Well, the notebook wasn't there, and if that's the case, it is because you didn't turn it in. What if you misplaced the notebook or lost it? Would I get all A's on biology if I was a bad, irresponsible student? I'm taking this with the principal." So I spoke with the principal, and the principal saw no flaws in my logic, and by all means, I was the brother of this year's valedictorian, and my grades were impeccable. The biology teacher had no way to prove I had lied, but couldn't prove she was telling the truth either, because she let me in and saw the notebook. So basically, that has been the most dishonest thing I've ever done in my academic life. If you don't think that is too bad, let me state my profession. I'm a physician. Story 30. ITT people ting on others for confessing to. They obviously feel bad about it. Really, Reddit is just like that to tell people you're a monster or I hope you, etc. for someone did, especially when someone was a kid. We all have skeletons, we all grow up, we all have guilt, and to have some S pile on you after you let it out. This place sometimes. Story 31. I was an IT guy. A conversation came up where we were talking about how easy it would be for a hacker to take most networks that have public-facing Ethernet jacks or devices if they wanted to. I mentioned that all you need is to find a publicly accessible IP device, like a printer, go in the config, and set the IP address to static and set it to whatever the default gateway for the network is. It will cause a conflict and essentially take out the whole network. My coworker, who was senior to me, didn't believe it would do anything, so he said to try it. Knowing it would, I did it. At first, it didn't seem to do anything. Then a few minutes later, we get a call from help desk asking if there's network issues because they're getting flooded with calls. Not only did it take down the entire network for the whole company, but it somehow also killed our FSMO domain controller. The OS instance was basically trashed. You couldn't do anything in it. I don't remember exactly the nature of it. I think it would basically lock up and not let you do anything. And if you disabled the network for that VM, it would then work again. It took a few days to recover from that, since we had to build a new DC, then coordinate with all the other building's IT people to register that DC as the new FSMO one so it talks to them, and we couldn't unregister the old one properly, which also caused issues. It was a huge, tedious task and basically involved a few days of disaster recovery, all because of my trick. So yeah, if a device with the same IP as the default gateway shows up on a corporate network, it's going to take out the whole company for a few days. Story 32. One time, when I worked customer service at a store when I was about 18, I noticed an 80 GB iPod Classic sitting in the lost and found drawer. There was no identifiable information on it and barely any music at all. This was around the time the Nano had first come out, so the 80 GB Classic was still the. It sat in that drawer for about 3 months without being claimed by anyone. I worked with all older ladies who had no clue what it even was. I watched that iPod tempt me for months, and one day I just took it. I loved that thing. Cherished it for years and still have it. However, I still feel guilty to this day for taking it. Deep down, I know it's stupid to feel guilty. But I feel bad about that poor SOB that lost their practically brand new iPod. Story 33. One time while going grocery shopping, I went through the checkout with my groceries on hand and without paying. It was then that I realized that as long as I went through the checkout and only stole groceries, anything toy-related or electronic, they had cameras, I wouldn't raise suspicion or SMT LOL, although I didn't do that for long. I'd say the main reason I stopped was because after one too many times stealing at a book electronics store, I got caught. But as they asked for the book I had stolen and lying to them that I had actually bought the book in another store, they told me to pack my things and wait while they left to verify whether or not I lied. Bro, you would not believe how fast I booked it. The second he turned around, I didn't look back. I just ran until I was closer to the bus station than the store and hid myself from them until the bus was around, and after that I didn't set foot anywhere close to that place for like 2-3 months. Oh Mao. I think it was at that moment where I realized I wasn't a fan of how the thrill almost getting caught stealing felt like. BTW, it wasn't my first time getting caught either, and my parents were only truly aware once, the worst part of that time being It was around the time I needed to find an internship for the sake of discovering a field of work, and that mom thought it'd be a good idea to send me drop a CV and a motivation letter at the police station. Story 34. My Sil has abandoned her turtles at our house. It's been literal years, and I do what I can for them, but we're not supposed to have them in our apartment, so their habitats are bare bones. Anyway, one of them got sick. I mean really sick. Not eating, barely moving. I felt terrible, but I couldn't shell, out thousands of dollars for someone else's pet, so I told my husband it died, put it in a box, took it down to the stream near my house, and let it go in the water. I sobbed as it floated away downstream. Then I went to work. At best, it died shortly afterward. At worst, I released an invasive species into the ecosystem. Story 35. Back in the 80s, my buddy lost his job and couldn't afford his car or insurance on it. I wanted to get rid of my beater car, and I had liability and comprehensive. I put another buddy in my car, and we arranged to have an accident at a rural four-way stop where it was my fault. Buddy got his car paid for, my car was paid for, and both buddies went to the emergency room to bump up their rewards. I knew insurance would settle without a quibble by paying 10 times the hospital bills. My passenger bought a mobile home with his money. I was scared for 5 years that his wife would tune us in if they split. Story 36. I had an affair with a monk when I was in my 20s, 20 years ago. Or, well, more like a relationship. But in the end, he decided to stay in the monastery. They have a guest house so I could visit, and well, he would sneak out his room in the evening and sneak back before the first prayer. Waiting 2+ years for his decision was as stupid as it was painful. But during that time, I didn't see that. We still talk every now and then, and when I have business trips close to the monastery, meet every other year or so. I sometimes think I should write a tell-all about it. Story 37. I worked as a temp for about 6 months in 2005. One of those temp assignments was at an ENT doctor's office handling the front desk. Well, the office manager who handled billing was also the person who gave access to the computer system. I forget what program they used, but it was some combination of scheduling and accounting billing system intended for small medical practices. Well, one day I'm working the front desk and this young mother comes into the office with her baby. Apparently the baby was deaf or hard of hearing in some way, and this ENT was supposed to be treating her. I go to check the patient in, and the system flags her as being past due on billing. I told the mother, and she stated to cry and just ended up having an emotional breakdown. She told me she didn't have any money and she'd just leave. I asked the office manager what to do, and she got bitchy and said, if she can't pay, tell her to leave and don't come back until she can. Well, that pissed me off. I felt like the mother's dignity didn't matter, and the manager was indifferent to the kid's medical needs. So I told the mother to just take a seat in the waiting room while I double-checked things. What I really did was just go into the accounting side of the system and delete the past due balance. It was a little over $300, which I guess was felony territory, but I wasn't thinking about it in those terms. I just wanted the little guy to win one. Story 38. Not really questionable, but certainly devious. Once I tried getting a granola bar out the fridge, so I take the Tupperware out, but the container on top of it with meat in it slides off as I'm taking it out and falls. It opens, and the meat falls off on the floor. So me being the kid I was, picked the meat up and put it back in the container, wiped the floor, got my granola bar, put everything else back in the fridge, and went about my business. Story 39. I was working in a restaurant with simply the meanest coworker I've ever had. He was evil to me, and it became physical. He was a much bigger guy than me, too. I was taking prerequisites for nursing school at the time, trying to get out of the restaurant biz. When he finally pushed my last button, I just so happened to be taking microbiology, and I just happened to have access to cultures of E. coli, and I surely knew where he kept his drinks in the walk-in. To this day, he is the only enemy I've ever had. He didn't die. It's okay. Story 40. I was in high school when a kid in front of me unknowingly dropped his phone during class. A guy next to me, who I knew was already committing CC fraud because he tried to get me in on it, pointed this out and gestured for me to grab it and pass it to them. I knew he didn't have good intentions, but I did it anyways. After class, he explained he was going to sell it and bring me my share. I kept my mouth shut because I was a stoner kid and wanted the money for weed. Next day, he gave me $50, and that was that. I felt a little bad at the time, but it wasn't until I got to know the kid who lost his phone that I felt really bad. His family had emigrated from China and weren't doing well financially. There was nothing I could think to do besides being as nice as I could be to him from then on. I'm sorry, Fang. Sorry. Story 41. I reported my ex-mil to her place of employment and the State Board of Nursing because she's a gigantic bigot. I always knew she was. And for the last few years of my marriage, I hated visiting her house because she's just a really, really terrible person, but I always left her alone because of her daughter. Recently, I found out she tried talking my ex-wife into taking me to court for half my assets, full custody, and part of my retirement fund as a divorce settlement after my ex and I came to an agreement and signed papers. Once I learned this, I collected all of her racist, bigoted, transphobic social media posts, printed them out, mailed to her site's HR, and emailed the State Board of Nursing. She's currently under investigation. Story 42, maybe no the most questionable, but still. When I was driving back from work, this was in Iceland. It's 4 hours trip back home. I drive and see a luggage on the middle of a driveway. I stop and put it in my car. I decided to open it and check if there's information of a owner. There was someone's stuff on top, clothes, watch, etc. I didn't check deeper because I found a passport, though maybe I can find the Pearson on FB or something. Couldn't find any info. So I drive further and there's another luggage. Since I have one, I tool another one. I thought I will bring it straight to the police station on the way. Then I found another bag, but empty and things scattered around. I thought someone already went through it, but I took everything I found. When I arrived to nearest police station, it was closed. No one working. So I opened the second luggage. Found passport and phone. Check online, no info. Try to call emergency, no answer. So I decide to go all the way back to Main City and bring to the main police station. But suddenly I find a post online. This travel agency lost didn't close the baggage door properly, and all the stuff was falling out. I texted them. They said they will stop by to get it. I told them I will give it only straight to the owners. They said okay. So I'm waiting. After some time, the tour guide that lost the stuff came alone to get it. I asked him, where is the owners? He said, I'm alone. I said I would like to give it straight to the owner. Then the guy got so pissed at me, got emotional breakdown, telling me to give it to him and how bad his day was. I said I still prefer to give it straight, I have no problem to deliver them. He was okay, whatever. He told me to bring it to the hotel at a certain time. When I arrived to the hotel, there was no one there and the guy said, oh, sorry, we're coming later. I just left all the stuff in the reception. I have lost my buds while gathering the stuff because it was so windy. It would have been nice to at least get thank you. That would be enough. Anyways, I still don't know if I did the right thing. Maybe I should have just left it there.